That would have been what a show that would be. My roommate got to see Black Sabbath in their heyday. That would be something. All right, everybody. Here's an intro over at the news notes. An intro. Sick. Watch this. Trump on Lindsey Graham. Mario Nawfal's team provided this one, and here it is. This is Trump. And I happen to post something about how Trump will just let any errant, ridiculous thing slide in the millisecond of where he is and not think about what he's saying, just to appeal to his audience, and then just walk on. It doesn't even matter what he says. That's this guy's mindset. So here's Trump on Lindsey Graham today for the great and wondrous funeral at the National Cathedral and inside the Capitol building. So yeah, you might have been one of the many people who wondered, again, how do you have a national cathedral in the United States? How does that somehow represent the nation, one cathedral? Here it is. He was extremely hawkish, I will tell you. He never saw a war he didn't like. Thanks, Donald. War criminal. Unbelievable. This is the man who literally just a few weeks ago was threatening the destruction of an entire civilization.
Yet, while he was always quick to laugh, and no one ever doubted the gravity of his mission, above all, Lindsey Graham believed in a strong America. He wanted a strong America. He had unwavering faith in the righteousness of American power and prayer. And he was extremely hawkish. I will tell you, he never saw a war that he didn't like.
So how do you get a strong America when, of course, you're sending the Americans into $40 trillion in debt for generations to come? You're depleting their energy supplies. You're stopping fertilizer. You're sending troops contrary to the Constitution. What exactly is America in the first place there, Donald? Did you happen to swear an oath to something that supposedly is the U.S. Constitution? Because if you did, then Lindsey Graham represents the exact opposite of a strong America. He is an enemy. He was a domestic enemy of the United States, and so are you, Donald. I don't think it takes too much to figure that out. Let's head over here and check this out. 5 people who should be tried as war criminals. That includes Bessent and Lutnick. Here's Shadow of Ezra as they all gathered in their masses. Yep, 5 who should be tried as war criminals. Benjamin Netanyahu gives, as this is the interpretation of Shadow of Ezra, specific orders to Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth at Lindsey Graham's funeral. Netanyahu wags his finger, points at them, and tells them exactly what needs to be done. Now, I don't know if this interpretation is anywhere near correct. Who knows? You can see Hegseth nod like a little Cub Scout. Who knows what they're discussing? They could be talking about, their favorite form of torture or something like that, or how wonderful it is to kill people off the coast of some place like the Caribbean. Who knows what it is? But you can see that all these people, every single one, Bessent, Rubio, Netanyahu, Hegseth, and Lutnick, every single one of these people could be charged with war crimes or aiding and abetting war crimes. And Bessent is included because he openly admitted to trying to overthrow the government of Iran through economic warfare. He called it economic warfare. So that's just great, isn't it? These are the people who are the cream of the crop of the United States, living off of your industry. And yesterday, we covered some of the astoundingly vile, clear, psychotic ways in which now deceased Senator Lindsey Graham viewed government-executed, tax-fed slaughter of innocent men, women, and children. Today, we're presenting a slightly different form of the news notes in order to construct a memorable true crime report about major criminal elements who met today in Washington at Graham's memorial at the National Cathedral again. However, that National Cathedral term works when it comes to meeting with the First Amendment, or deeper still, how a nation state can claim for everyone that one cathedral stands for everyone caged by the tax-consuming monopoly on the use of a legalized aggressive violence. That would be the state. How can they say that there is something that represents everybody? that one cathedral stands for everyone caged in there. So we're going to review in a moment some of those statements from Lindsey Graham that we played yesterday. But I want to show you Sean Hannity first. Glenn Greenwald brought this up. He spotted this. It was a good thing to see that he brought this up. It shows that Glenn Greenwald stands, obviously, very solidly in continuance of his anti-war policies, and he recognizes just how evil some of these people are. Here's Hannity. Glenn says the idea that you can't criticize a public political figure when they die is stupid, and the stupidity of it becomes brazen and obvious when the person's death is manipulated and exploited to generate support for wars, something I'm sure Lindsey Graham would have no problem with, actually, as Sean Hannity is doing here with Lindsey Graham's corpse. Now, I want to just bring this up briefly before we go to that video clip, because I was thinking about someone, I think it was in the judge and Karen Kwiatkowski's conversation, the judge might have said, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but, and so on and so forth. And he wasn't speaking ill of the dead. He was stating a fact that Lindsey Graham was a warmonger and supported war crimes and genocide. That's not speaking ill of the dead. Speaking ill of the dead would be lying about a dead person, would be unfairly criticizing a dead person when they're not there. But to say that he was a warmonger and supported genocide is just factual. There's no denying that. To say that he was a domestic enemy of the U.S. Constitution is underplaying it. To think that we have to live through this era, but they were all like this. Every American era was like this, all the way back to Alexander Hamilton. And here is another H. Hannity.
My perspective was Lindsey had moral clarity. He understood right from wrong, good from evil. And he knew, as President Trump knows, as Israel knows, as I know, there can be no path to peace until evil is defeated. Evil, in this case, embodied in a death cult, an ideology, the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Thanks to the partnership of the President, the Prime Minister, and many other allies, I pray their days are numbers, and I pray that Lindsey's dream of a lasting peace becomes realized soon.
It's just, it's so starkly upside down. It's just ridiculous. It's just absolutely crazy. So we're going to go down past those things from yesterday, back to today, and then we're going to play some of those things from yesterday just to remind people, okay? So let's talk again a little bit about Hannity. It's very important to praise the Israeli genocider-in-chief as well. And don't forget, Hannity actually had the gall to say that Lindsey Graham stood for peace and that Lindsey Graham understood right from wrong. We were just discussing last night, they have no concept of right and wrong. They don't even understand it, and neither does Hannity as he stands up there. If he's surrounded by other people who don't understand right and wrong, and they're all on the same side of an agenda, then that's right for them. And he's saying that the Iranians are the death cult. When did the Iranians attack the United States in an offensive way? Never. When did the Iranians use nuclear weapons against civilians? Never. When did the Iranians acquire nuclear weapons? Never. When did the Americans lie about the Iranians trying to acquire nuclear weapons? Often. When did the Americans assassinate people? When did the Israelis assassinate people? Often. When did the Americans break their agreements and try to assassinate people while those people were trying to reach them for supposed negotiations? Often. Here is Hannity talking about the genocider-in-chief. This guy's got no shame, as I noted. It's astounding to be so completely swaddled in the cloth of war is a truly vile thing. Hannity has no shame.
I see Prime Minister Netanyahu is here. Mr. Prime Minister, you too have been a dear friend of mine for 30 years. It's an honor to have you. And Lindsey would have been blown away that you took this long journey with your beautiful bride to be here today. He loved you. He loved the state of Israel. He loved the people of Israel. Under your leadership, Israel has been one of America's most consistent and loyal allies. He was never shy to say it to the day he passed. And just as President Trump has been Israel's strongest friend in the history of the White House, you know, the two partners aligned together. Lindsey was that friend to Israel in the United States Senate, as long as I've known this man. I see Prime Minister Netanyahu is here.
So,
Mr. Prime.
What struck me was, and I've only seen bits of mafia movies and TV shows, but my uncle Dan Butcheroni changed his name from something else that was Sicilian when he was a prize fighter in Philadelphia. And he changed it to Butcheroni, so they used to call him the Butcher. And all I can think of when I see Hannity here is different branches of the mafia getting together for a Don's funeral, like the Sicilian mob coming in and some other branch of the mob coming in, and maybe they're, you know, outside paying their respects, or members of the Irish mob or something like that. A couple of the guys. That's what this is. Everything is backwards. I can't. You don't even need to say anymore. It's so absurd. Literally, you can play clips of these people and then, of course, go back and play clips that we played last night of, yeah, Lindsey Graham literally laughing on the day he discovers that little kids are being blasted, that America is attacking Iran without any constitutional anything, even if people thought that that were important. Here we go.
Look what we've done here.
I know.
I almost cried.
Yeah.
I mean, like, how long have we been pushing this?
Well, I mean, you've been pushing this for years, right?
Right, it's here. I talked to Trump this morning.
It's literally.
Oh, he's Jack.
Yeah.
It's the best thing I've ever done. He loves blowing stuff up. So, you know, there are a lot of people inside didn't want to do it. So I've had my challenges. But President Trump, when he gets into the zone, he listens, he asks good questions, you know, no tweeting. He has done nothing. He hadn't tweeted much at all. No drama. He's been a great wartime president. I said last night that Trump.
How can he be a great wartime president when there's no declared war? You see how ridiculous this is? And they just accept this terminology. Sean, like all of Fox News, great wartime president, they'll use this term. It's like this is like Lewis Carroll could have written this story. It's so absurd. It's like the Red Queen. Yeah, that's right, the Red Queen, right there. Unbelievable. And then don't forget this one. As Marjorie Simonin of RT writes, Lindsey Graham in March, 3 or 4 weeks, just going to take 3 or 4 weeks, everybody, you know, to do what they want to do to Iran, which is, of course, change it the way they want it in their model.
Oh, to be honest with you, I think about 3 to 4 weeks, we should have them in a spot where they start losing control of some cities. And what we're trying to do is just get a few cities to fall in the next month, get the Arabs more openly involved tomorrow or by the end of the week, and just have almost irreversible momentum. Oh, to be honest with you, I think
Unbelievable.
About 3 to 4 weeks.
By the way, he was on the line. I didn't know this. He was on the line with Jake Sullivan on that. So next time you hear Jake Sullivan talking about, well, maybe the United States is going a little too far with Iran and stuff like that, just keep that in mind. These people are friggin' insufferable. Why do we have to exist in a time when these people exist at the same time? It's just disgusting. Unbelievable. And then, of course, the great call to his friend. I'm sure they'll be spending a lot of time together in the future. I'm sure Netanyahu will be meeting him someday. And yes, as I mentioned, I don't think the sunscreen will stop the burn. Here it is, that glorious phone call where he gets to tell Netanyahu that he's glad he's your friend.
How are you?
I'm just so impressed. Glad to be your friend.
I'm glad you are my friend.
I'm going to meet with the president this weekend.
Who are these guys? What the heck? Can you imagine? Can you imagine being their kids someday, if they ever have kids, and seeing, what were you doing, dude? Did you ever speak up? Did you ever say a thing, or did you just take the paycheck? Unbelievable. Now, another reminder, everybody, I mentioned this last night, but there were other countries that also allowed Netanyahu to pass their airspace as he came into the United States. Not only Canada is a member of the ICC, but there were other nations. I believe France, he went over French, and I believe Italian, and I'm not sure, maybe Greek airspace as well. I'll double check on that. But yeah, they didn't stop him. So what's the use of signing up for the ICC? Especially now that Marco Rubio has made sure that one of the lead prosecutors has been booted because he was going to prosecute Netanyahu. And of course, because they were able to make sure that the government of Venezuela pulled out of the ICC. Why should anybody be bothered? It's just astounding. I want to show you something excellent that really, really struck me. Two things tonight, little extended pieces that I want to give to you. And then we'll come back after we discuss the Lindsey Graham material and the absolute madness of these people. And it's insufficient to say these things. It is not sufficient. The level of depravity and evil that they represent, and the fun way that they look at these things, the ease with which they roll into these lives and these roles, and they continue in them. In this perpetual machine of the parties and the party apparatchiks and the state party people and the lawyers and the different special interest groups and the arms manufacturers and the intel people and the AI people and the pharmaceutical people and the police and the mayors, and how they all try to prop up this teepee with one single tent pole of statism. And they're all there to support the people at the top. It's really sick. It's really friggin' disgusting. So let's offer an opportunity for Ron Paul and Daniel McAdams to mention some of their thoughts. Now, this comes in after their opening, as they close their first segment, discussing what we discussed last night, the new report about how, gee, surprise, the DEA notes that Donald Trump's killing of 200 people in the Eastern Pacific and the Caribbean did not stop the flow of drugs, especially cocaine. What a shocker. And Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul bring up astute points about the fact that prohibition does not work, that this is not constitutional, that these people's lives are being ruined, that there is no right to stop people from carrying something that is not harming another individual, that the people engaged in the violence are the government thugs, that they're wasting people's money. And then they got to get into the larger kinetic warfare mindset of the big pig. Let's hear from Daniel McAdams and Ron Paul. There'll probably be a commercial.
Yeah, there you go. That's why I was hitting low. This is how I zero.
And here's Ron Paul and Daniel McAdams.
And the answer was, kill them. I read that, but I still don't want to believe it. But I'm scared that it might have been a true story.
Yes, and that's been documented a couple times, Dr. Paul, where they went back and finished off the survivors.
Remember, Hegseth ordered, there were 2 survivors on one of the boats in the Caribbean, and Hegseth went back, just as Ron Paul said. He said, kill him, double tap. And by the way, there was no fog of war. There was a 40-minute delay between the first hit and the second.
Shameful. It's murder, and it's Americans should be ashamed of any president, whether Democrat or Republican, who's involved in extrajudicial killings. In fact, that's one of the things the U.S. government uses to judge whether other countries are free. If they do extrajudicial killings, then they're not free countries. Well, we're doing those exact same things. But I guess it's time to move on, though, Dr. Paul. The second thing we want to cover, because today is the funeral of Lindsey Graham, and there's a new information that came out. There's a documentary filmmaker that has been following Lindsey Graham for the last few years, and apparently he's gathered hours and hours of information about Graham. But some of the stuff coming out, Dr. Paul, is just despicable. There's a clip where Lindsey Graham is saying, once the war started, once Trump started bombing Iran, Lindsey Graham said, "Look what we've done. I almost cried. How long have we been pushing this?" He was so happy about Iran getting blown up. He says, "I talked to Trump this morning and he's jacked. He says it's the best thing I've ever done. He loves blowing stuff up," and so on and so on, Dr. Paul. So it's no surprise that Graham is a monster, but watching him on the video talking this way is just absolutely repulsive.
But the real political and educational challenge we have is that Graham has gone his way in doing all this evil, but he's in death. He didn't lose. Nobody pointed this out. Nobody wants to read this. If you say what we're saying and repeating, we're on the defensive, and we're on the side that is not winning because they're going to make a saint of this guy. But that's a relative term too. It's not lasting, but that doesn't satisfy me. It still made me sick about all this. But the other word that comes to me when I read all this stuff and the language, and I hate even bringing it up because I think it's really a tough word, and you're challenging people, you're insinuating things. But what I read suggests to me that activity like this is psychotic. It just can't be anything else. You can't even be even approaching, a common understanding of good and evil. And I think that, the people who do this thing, even a healthy dose of trying to understand and study natural law wouldn't solve the problem, because they seem to be so entrenched in this, and we haven't seen many people who have changed their attitude. We see a lot of people who join them. But I should take that statement back a little bit, because I'm sure there are some. We just don't get to hear those good stories.
One of the other things that came out with this video, Dr. Paul, is something that I don't throw the term around as lightly as a lot of other people do, but I think it's absolutely treasonous. He was sitting U.S. senator, was actively conspiring with Prime Minister Netanyahu, a foreign government, was conspiring with Netanyahu to basically trick Trump or trap Trump into attacking Iran. He was working with a foreign power to affect the foreign policy of the United States. If that's not treason, if you or I did that, imagine if we were doing that with Russia, as was always claimed, we'd be in the pokey. So he's not only a bad guy, he's also a traitor.
There was one story in this little article that was interesting, but it also very sad, and that is that Netanyahu has served as one to restrain Graham, because Graham wanted to immediately go, but even before all these other wars going on, he said, we really have to get going on Lebanon. We need to do this. We need to bomb it. And Netanyahu comes up with an astounding statement of
and I just want to say, in that phone call, you can actually hear Netanyahu saying, no, don't do that. Let us handle what's going on in Lebanon. while you do your thing in Iran, essentially giving them cover, which is exactly what they're doing. In fact, they're drawing up a new yellow line in Lebanon, just like they have in Gaza. It's astounding.
Touches common sense. He says, no, he was trying to be diplomatic. No, we shouldn't be doing that because they might retaliate against Israel. Just a common sense answer. I think that is that demonstrates that Graham, he sort of loses it, and I don't think he ever backed down on an issue war, and it just like we express our sorrow when we see another war started and seeing people die from it. But here you told a story or repeated the story about he says he said he could cry, but his crying was a crying of happiness. Oh, we finally did it. That is, I can't say anything more than that's sick.
Yeah, I mean, it shows the sickness of both Graham and Netanyahu, because the reason Netanyahu said, no, let's don't go full bore because we don't want retaliation, is like what you said the other day, what Smotrich said, I forget what his position is, but he's one of the hardliners. He said, no, things are going fine the way they are. We're not dying, we're not getting hit, and Iran is getting bombed. So they love us fighting their wars for them, and that's basically what Netanyahu was doing. The other thing is that Graham, at the beginning, he predicted that Iran would lose would lose control of cities within 3 or 4 weeks, and then the Arabs would get involved, and there would be momentum, and Iran would be overthrown. Well, here we are, months later. Iran's grip on its government is as tight as ever, as is its grip on the Strait of Hormuz. And Lindsey Graham has gone on to other things. He went before the Iranian regime went.
He went before the Iranian regime went. Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of innocent people are dead because of the mindset of people and the work, the awful, terrible work of people like Lindsey Graham. And it really is astounding, again, to consider that he can engage in phone calls. A sitting senator, all these people talking patriotism and, you can't have an influence from an outside government. He's literally on the phone with the prime minister of another country, plotting ways to be a worm tongue in the ear of the president to get the president to sway his already unconstitutional unilateral executive actions. How many levels of dark and twisted errors and evil and treachery is that? Would one call that treason? It's just amazing. There's no declared war. He's on the phone with a dude, and they're talking about, we don't want, can't have the outside influence coming in for voting. You can't have migrants vote. Dude, you literally got the prime minister of a foreign country who's wanted as a war criminal by most of the countries in the world. You're on the phone with the dude, coming up with ideas on how to kill people. And you've got a problem with a dude from Haiti voting in New York? Methinks there's a bit, and yes, they can be associated again, because as I mentioned, the Constitution that those guys swore to, Mr. Graham and Donald Trump, it allows the states, literally, if they want to allow foreigners to vote if they're there. There's nothing that would stop them if they wanted them to vote for the electoral college system. For Congress and Senate, that's different. Congress can come up with rules in that. I'm the anarchist. I'm just saying, it doesn't mean I support the Constitution when I'm saying what the rules are. I'm just trying to bring it up because somebody ought to know if they're in DC. Maybe they might want to read the friggin' thing, right? Astounding. Let me give you a little bit more. Now, this is going to be another extended piece. I might play 2 separate segments because this entire 25-minute conversation between Karen Kwiatkowski and Judge Napolitano was one of the best I've seen from anybody in months. And one of the reasons it was because both of them are on the same page when it comes to the nature of the state. And it goes to that quote from Lord Acton. I want to offer this to you, as I said in the news notes, the entire program from Judge Napolitano and his guest, Karen Kwiatkowski, today, Lieutenant Colonel, of course, their comments about the state and the evil it is are perfect. We come in just after the theme.
Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Tuesday, July 28th, 2026. My dear friend, Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski joins us now. Colonel Karen, a pleasure, as always. So the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, not someone that you and I are fond of quoting, nevertheless said, everything the government has, it has stolen. Everything the government says is a lie.
Oh.
Worth pursuing, worth considering the likely truthfulness of much of that.
Yeah, I think, and it's not even native to our government, and it's not native to whether it's a communist government or a republic or a democracy. What Nietzsche is describing, people throughout history have described, and so you have to be very careful with government. It is an entity, a living entity, and it has its own objectives and its own agenda. And it pursues its own survival. I think that's really what we all have to come to terms with.
Isn't the state just a monopoly of force in a geographical region? I remember debating Justice Scalia with us once. I was privileged to interview him. It wasn't a Fox News product. It was a Brooklyn Law School product when I was on the faculty there. There were 2,500 people in the audience. And of course, he disputed this vehemently and claimed that the state had a presumption of morality. I would argue the state should have a presumption of immorality. Government is essentially the negation of liberty, is it not?
It is by definition. I'm surprised anybody would defend the other side. But I thought everybody knew it was a monopoly of force. That's the
you would think this was 2 years before he died. He had spent 50 years as a law professor and a judge and a justice. You would think he would have been on our side on this. He was not.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Well, I think we're all learning it the hard way, that government is immoral in every way. You know, I mean, look at what we have. And we, you know, we want to think, all people, I think, want to think well of their governments. Certainly we do in the United States, because we are preached at for our entire lives about how great our government is, how good and moral it is. And it takes a little while sometimes to start believing your own eyes and to start looking into the reality a little more closely. And then you realize you've been lied to. It's all governments do it, even the best governments. And I guess if you want to be an American chauvinist, which, you know, a patriot, that's great. That's good. We believe we have a good government. It still lies to us constantly. It is still mobilized and motivated by an absolute control of power, you know,
right.
Monopoly on the use of force, the monopoly of force.
Well, let's take Pete Hegseth as an example. I mean, isn't it more likely than not that the reason President Trump did not follow through on his threats about a week ago, midweek last week, to visit the gates of hell on the people of Iran, because the United States cannot sustain a military function of that size much longer because we're running low on ammunition. Nevertheless, Hegseth told the Senate Finance Committee, from whom he's seeking $88 billion on top of the $1.5 trillion, another topic for another time, under oath that, oh, no, we have all the military equipment we need.
Yeah. So he doesn't understand what under oath means, clearly. Yeah. There are multiple sources of information inside and outside of the Pentagon, people that are far outside of the Pentagon, including our near peer competitors around the world, who are counting and monitoring what we have wasted, expended, lost, had destroyed in this, both the Ukraine war, but also particularly in what we're doing against Iran. And so the numbers there are true in the sense that they can be substantiated and they can be validated by people from around the world with differing agendas. So to call Pete Hegseth a liar is, an understatement. It's a shame he did it under oath. I mean, this is, what is it? Isn't lying to Congress something really bad?
Well, lying under oath is perjury. Sometimes they forget, I'm doing it in air quotes, to administer the oath to government officials, but lying to Congress, even if you're not under oath in an official capacity, is the same as perjury. Now, members of Congress can lie to us, just like FBI agents, when interrogating us, can lie to us, but we can't lie to them. You can thank Congress and you can thank the federal courts for upholding that bizarre dichotomy. You remember the Martha Stewart case?
Oh, yeah.
She went to jail for lying to an FBI agent in the same conversation, the very same conversation that formed the basis for her indictment. The FBI had lied to her, and that FBI agent got a promotion.
Wow. And that's the monopoly on the use of lies. They also have the monopoly on the use of lies as well as the use of force.
Well, we're talking about lying. Do we know the casualty figures in Iran? Do we know how many American troops have been injured and how many have been killed?
Okay, so I want to pause it there. We're going to come back to them as well. But I want to go over now into Anti-War's coverage of this, because they've got the number, and as we know, the number is actually lower according to the officials. So Anti-War's got this. Dave DeCamp and the great team put this out yesterday at about 12:30. Since July 7th, 4 U.S. troops have been killed and more than 200 have been wounded in the Iran war, according to the Pentagon's official casualty database known as the Defense Casualty Analysis System. The 4 dead U.S. soldiers include 3 who were killed in a July 17th Iranian missile attack on a U.S. base in Jordan. They have been identified as Private Isabella Gonzalez, 19, of Carrollton, Texas; First Lieutenant Tyler James Feehan, 25, of Ewa Beach, Hawaii; and Sergeant Angel Rampersad, 28, of Ozone Park. The 4th soldier died on July 18th in Iraq, identified as Sergeant Michael Emmanuel Swinton, a 30-year-old father from North Carolina, during what the U.S. military called a controlled demolition of an exploded Iranian drone. Well, I guess it wasn't very well controlled now, was it? The database says that 207 troops were also wounded, including 182 U.S. Army soldiers, 21 U.S. Navy personnel, and 211 casualties are considered part of overseas operations, which began on July 7th, as the Pentagon separated them from the earlier casualties in the war. During the Operation Epic Fury, the code name for the first months of the war, at least 14 troops were killed and 417 wounded, for a total of 642 casualties since President Trump launched the so-called war with Israel on February 28th. And don't forget, they tried to remove 4 of those people 4 days ago because they said, well, they were in the interim period when there was no actual kinetic activity, so we can't say that they are casualties of war. Now, you can't say they're casualties of war technically according to the Constitution anyway, just like the Korean so-called war or the Vietnam so-called war. They weren't called wars when they were actually operating them. And so these people and their families are being shafted by the very government that sent them there. But as I mentioned inside the news notes, the people who go there, the soldiers, have a responsibility to read the Constitution and to know that their oath says something important, supposedly as an oath, that they are only supposed to act according to constitutional orders. And these are not constitutional orders to go to any of these places. So why not mention that? Why not bring it up? It doesn't mean that I think these people are necessarily evil people. They might have made a mistake, but they are not right. They did not act according to their oaths. That's just the way that it is, and they should know better. Very clearly. So anybody who gets deployed during a time when there is no declared war and you're sitting in some base in foreign soil, ask yourself, how is this constitutional? How is a standing army constitutional when it's supposed to be the militia and the president only becomes the commander in chief when there is a declared war? Then he commands the troops that are called up. It's a very simple syllogism. It's very simple. It's a 3-step logic syllogism. 1, 2, 3, boom, 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 and you're done. How tough is that for Lindsey Graham to figure out? Amazing. Now, something that I want to bring up was on Dialogue Works today. Again, this slight detour away from to go back to the judge and Karen Kwiatkowski today and get more of their really, really important information. But Mario, it was Nima Al-Khorshid welcomed Patrick Henningsen today. And Patrick brought up something that I thought was fairly important. So I want to show this to you. I want to make sure that I've got this all set up for you. Okay, so I'm going to bring myself back up here, make sure that I've got it right.
Price worth paying for it.
Okay, and I'm going to go to this one. I think this is the one. Yeah, this is the one. So I thought Patrick has a very interesting theory, and I think he might be onto something here. So you know how the judge and Karen Kwiatkowski and many other people, Larry Johnson and others, I've been talking about it. So many others have been discussing how, and the judge brought it up, the United States doesn't have the arms to sustain a long campaign to go into Iran, to get boots on the ground and do those sorts of things, right? Trump keeps threatening it, especially with air tactics and rockets and dropping bombs and things like that. But Patrick has a point about what he thinks is the longer term strategy. And it parallels what I've been saying about this narrative of conflict between Netanyahu and the Trump administration. When J.D. Vance goes out there and starts spouting nonsense to Joe Rogan about, well, you know, not getting along with Netanyahu sort of stuff, right? It's all theater. It's a Punch and Judy show. That's all it is, just puppets. And they're trying to get to the election to make it look like now the people in charge of the White House, and they're scrambling to do it because they're looking at the polls, the people in the White House are suddenly not happy with Netanyahu. After, 3 years of genocide in Gaza, after occupation for decades, after mowing the lawn, after creeping into Lebanon, being pushed out, then trying to creep into it again through kinetic forces and cheesy, ridiculous so-called treaties that Marco Rubio negotiates that run completely contrary to the very MOU that the administration had just negotiated days before with Iran. All these things are just piles of crap that they're throwing out there so that they can get people to think that there's this conflict between Israel and the United States and Netanyahu. And there isn't. And they just need to try to build it up so that they can try to not lose the House and the Senate in November. That's all the GOP wants. That's all they're looking for. And then it'll revert right back. The kill switch will be right back engaged. And Patrick has brought something up. Let me show you what he has to say without any more words from me that might prejudice this and sort of take it away from what he has as his theory. But I think it's pretty clear, and I'll sort of reiterate it as far as I understand it. I think he's onto something here. So here it is from earlier today on Dialogue Works. If you get to watch the channel on YouTube, it is a great channel. And of course, Patrick Henningsen from 21 Wire, Sundays at noontime. 21 Wire. Patrick's over in England, and Nima, I think, is originally from Iran. I don't know where he's living now.
That's pretty clear. Then Trump went on Fox, which was interesting today, Nima. I don't know if you caught this, but he was kind of pushing back on Netanyahu. Again, I don't put a lot of credence in this good cop, bad cop scenarios, but basically Netanyahu was bragging about Pickaxe Mountain. and how there's operations ready to go, greenlit for Pickaxe Mountain. What could that be? Nuclear bomb or something, tactical nukes, whatever. Trump basically reprimanded Netanyahu for saying that publicly in Washington, because that's undermining the U.S. Element of surprise, you could say. So that's or this is just them sending an indirect threat to the Iranians, if you see what I mean. However way you want to read this. So all this is, a lot of this drama is building up right now in Washington. You've got Zelensky and Netanyahu both festooning around Washington, D.C., being feted by all these spineless lawmakers. So, but I think for Israel, they're content at the moment because the Iran's not firing any missiles at them, and they've legalized, in the U.S. view anyway, they've legalized and legitimized their occupation of South Lebanon. And they're continuing the ethnic cleansing of Gaza and pogroms that are ongoing in the West Bank. So at this moment, Israel's happy, or at least Netanyahu, at this moment. But there will come a time where there will have to be escalation because this isn't going to hold indefinitely, this current situation. We'll see.
There was a report yesterday that Donald Trump is asking Israeli media reporting that Donald Trump is asking Benjamin Netanyahu to withdraw from Syria, from Lebanon, from Gaza. Today, Channel 12 reported that Donald Trump didn't demand, an Israeli withdrawal from any sector during the meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister. So it was
that's key right there. You caught that, right? Let me just go back to that, because that's a tell right there. This shows you that they're working in tandem. This is a simulacrum that they're offering to people. What is really going on is the U.S. is giving cover for Israel to go in and take southern Lebanon.
Withdrawal from any sector during the meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister. So it was all about, manipulation and the way that they're trying to do that. But nobody would believe that anymore, in my opinion, after,
especially the new Syrian charged affairs in Washington, D.C. is former al-Nusra terrorist Mohammed Kanatari. That's the new.
We'll discuss him in a moment, that man, and I'll show you a little something from a reporter who was kidnapped, a female reporter who was kidnapped in Syria by this head-chopping man who is now a diplomat for al-Sharaa, who will be visiting Washington often after the United States overthrow of Assad on behalf of the Israelis.
Ambassador, I guess, Syrian ambassador in Washington, D.C., Al-Qaeda. I mean, he's literally terrorist videos all over the internet from his head chopping days.
And Hannity's got the gall to talk about Iran as the leading state sponsor of terrorism. Do you feel like you're getting spit in the face?
It's a joke. It's a joke. And then the U.S. government's sanctioning people like Francesca Albanese and Kareem Khan, who are just basically doing their job as lawyers for the UN or for the ICC. But if you're an Al-Qaeda head chopper, no problem. You can be an ambassador in Washington. It's so ridiculous. So ridiculous. Netanyahu is the biggest war criminal of our generation, easily. And while Mayor Mamdani in New York said he would like to arrest him, but realizes legally he can't, it's known that the U.S. shouldn't allow someone like that to hold court in Washington. Not anymore. He's gotten away with it so many times before, but now it's just to the point. It's just obscene right now. And pride before the fall. I think eventually that day maybe not very long from now. It's coming. But this thing is just going to collapse. It's so ridiculous right now.
Now, here's the other segment I want to play for you with Patrick's theory, which I think holds. There's a lot to this. It's pretty smart.
Price worth paying for Israel. And they're paying it, and they'll continue to pay it, and the U.S. will just keep moving its assets around. And all the military experts are going to say, well, that's not a good idea because the U.S. don't have any interceptors left. They're using the old PAC systems, and America's lost. That might be true from a grand strategy point of view. But from a short-term political and military operations point of view, they're going to continue doing this strategy because they only need to rearm and reload for like short bursts of attacks against Iran. They have U.S. has plenty of different military options, different types of standoff munitions, missiles, submarines. They can just continue doing this for like the next couple of years. And meanwhile, they can degrade this is their plan anyway, it's not mine, but to degrade Iran's infrastructure and military capabilities and naval capabilities to manage the Strait of Hormuz over time. That is the U.S. strategy. It's funded, it's in motion now, and it will continue right through the midterm elections and into 2027, no matter what, until the new president comes in 2028 or after that, who knows. But even then, they can continue this over time.
So Patrick, essentially, his thesis on this, and I think he makes a really good point, is that Trump's strategy, and he says this has already been worked out, is to hit Iran, pull back, say they're going to negotiate, then hit again repeatedly until November. And Patrick says, yes, in the long term, the United States is depleting supplies, but all they need to do is get through to November. And what might be interesting here is whether or not, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Trump, just before the elections, says that he has come to a grand peace agreement with Iran. So delay, hit, pull back, hit, pull back, hit, pull back until November, conflict. Then, we've got an agreement. Trump is in. This is great. All those Republicans get this surge. Maybe in October, suddenly Trump is the peace president again. The strait is open. Everything's good. But until that time, I think people are well aware of what is causing this problem. And what is causing this problem is Donald Trump. And the fact that we can't get fuel is part of the problem. The fact that people can't get fertilizer is part of the problem. The fact that they welcome war criminals is part of the problem. Let's go to this. Mario Nafal writes, nearly half of Americans want their own government to arrest Netanyahu if he sets foot in the country. An Economists /YouGov poll out this week puts it at 49% for arrest. And the number that makes it remarkable is the crossover. 23% of Trump's own voters say the same. Now, this breaks it down with a little bit more granularity. So here it is. New poll. Prem Thacker writes, and this is that Economist YouGov poll. And again, I worked in a polling place, and if you've got, I generally don't discuss polls unless there's some a very large differential in the polls. Because if you've got a poll, just to let you know, if you ever work at a polling place, I just did it for money, and I actually quit. I was like, was like, it turned out that the polling place was working half the time for the Boston Globe and half the time for the Dukakis campaign. And I just thought they were working for the newspaper. So that wasn't cool. And they were doing push polls. They were trying to give people information over the phone that was not real information about various candidates and stuff. So I left. But too bad I didn't have a camera back then. I could have recorded it and exposed it all. But if you've got a poll, people often talk about a margin of error, 3.5%, anything around that and below is a pretty good poll. But even at the 3.5% mark for a poll, I don't look at that as necessarily trustworthy, because I literally worked in one of these places and I saw how they would manipulate the pool of the poll, the actual source, where they would make phone calls to people who lived in certain areas around Boston that they knew would be hardcore left wing, and they would avoid the other ones. It's like, gee, I wonder if that's going to skew your poll results, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And then the questions are phrased in certain ways and things like that. But when it's a very sizable differential, then you can say, okay, maybe there's something to this. Now, it's possible, with aggregations, people could, get such great samples and still manipulate the samples. But here it is. Americans believe the U.S. should arrest Benjamin Netanyahu by a margin of 22%. Yeah, total 49 to 27. Then they break it down according to race, out of whatever. It doesn't matter to me. 23% of Trump voters agree as well. And by the way, Kamala Harris voters, 74 to 10%. Wow. That's intense. It's good to see that. Now, evidently, as I noted, U.S. soldiers must be used to slaughter, evidently U.S. soldiers must be used to slaughter innocents for Trump, Netanyahu, and other warmongers. The U.S. soldiers, as I noted, ought to abide by their constitutional oaths. And this goes back to the more than 200 casualties from anti-war. Now let's go back to the judge and Karen Kwiatkowski and complete the rest of this segment.
We don't know the answer. I'm positive the government has lied to us from the very beginning. And by lying, some of that is delaying the information. They have injuries, they have deaths, they're not reporting them. They're hiding that information, they're delaying it and covering it up. But even what we have heard from our government, I think the recent numbers are like 400 and something injured. 18 now, 18 or 19 deaths. I don't believe that for a second. If you look at the level of destruction, and this war has gone on 6 months. 6 months of an enemy, we call Iran our enemy, so we started this war and we were fighting them, they're our enemy. That enemy has wreaked havoc on 17 of our 17 bases that we have in the Middle East. So much havoc, we've moved our airplanes so far to the west. We're in Israel now, and Israel never used to allow us to operate from their territory. They must do that now because all our bases are messed up. And by messed up, I mean we can't use them. There were people at all these bases. There were civilian contractors at these bases. I doubt we're hearing much about them. There were, of course, active duty military. We didn't protect them. We have heard tiny bits of early on in the war where we left people in temporary shelters or something, and that's in fact some of the biggest chunk of casualties early in the war were because of that. I think in I want to say Bahrain, but I'm not sure which. But yeah, we have definitely suffered loss of life amongst Americans and our allies and contractors in the region that we're not telling, our government is not telling you. And also, I mean, they're not even telling us what's happening. And we're losing a lot of airplanes. I don't hear Mr. Trump talking about airplanes being destroyed on the ground.
Robert Barnes, who's the Tennessee lawyer who comes on the show from time to time because he has incredible contacts inside the White House, told us that the injured is in the thousands. The thousands.
Wow.
Chris, do we have a chart showing the numbers the government has revealed or a full screen? Look at that. So the government claims 417 injured and 14 killed. That's before the 4 killed. So the government says 18 killed total and 417 injured. Barnes couldn't dispute the 18, although he said it's probably larger, but he profoundly disputes this 417, saying it's in the thousands. But what does the government gain by lying?
Well, one thing that our government did not do in this particular Middle Eastern war, or any of them prior to this, is they did not talk it up. They did not promote it. They did not really spend time lying to us in advance of the war. They pretty much just acted like we assumed we've always been at war with Iran, so this must be normal. And then they launched this war. And of course, Iran fought back because I guess they didn't listen to the right intelligence. I'm not sure what that was about. Maybe Israel lied. I don't know. So Iran really put the hurt to us and did damage. Because they hadn't sold the concept of the war, it was very unpopular. And that's probably why they didn't try to sell it. They knew they couldn't sell it. But the problem with that is now the cost is the American people can easily say, I told you so. We didn't want this war. It was a stupid war. It was not necessary for our security, not a concern to us. And now you're giving us dead bodies on top. So they really don't want to provide that information because they know they screwed up from the very beginning. And I think this is really Trump's problem. And the administration, but Trump himself, when they talk about him being in a quagmire or backed into a corner where he has no good choices, he did that to himself by failing to get popular support for the war that he said he wanted. Maybe Israel wanted it. He wanted it for Israel. I don't know, but he didn't try to sell it. He didn't try to really gauge popular support ahead of time, made an assumption, just like we did about the ability of the Iranians to defend their country and their interests. So, it's he's in his position now where how are you going to convince Americans who already are very unpopular? This war, 70%. We don't like it. It's costing us not just money, but all kinds of lost opportunities. We're not happy with it. How are you going to present the information that, oh, by the way, this war I got us in, it was really stupid. We didn't do it for to put America first or anything like that. Oh, by the way, we got a lot of troops that are coming home, amputees, brain damage, and of course, in a box, lots of them. And that's not a winning hand. You know how Trump likes to talk about who's got the winning hand? Well, he doesn't have it. So they have to lie. And they think if they can drag it out, lie enough, control some of the media outcomes that will happen as these troops eventually do come home to their families. And they're counting on that being something that they can manage with centralized state media. They're not going to celebrate these injuries like we have done in past wars. We won't be holding up the great veteran of this war, because as soon as you put a mic to that guy's mouth or that gal's mouth, they're going to tell you about the great victory we had against Iran. And it's not going to be the state story. So, the lie it's not just ongoing. The lies about what this war has meant to this country, to our military, our capabilities, what it says about our military leadership and our what we have left. I mean, this is a terrible story, and they are going to continue to lie and really, I think, silence veterans when they come back because.
All right. So let me get your thoughts. I'm going to turn to Rumble, and if I've missed any comments, let me know. If you want to get your comments on the screen over at X, feel free to do that. And, of course, that's at Guard Goldsmith. And after the fact, if you thought we've missed anything, if you thought we've been unfair to somebody, let us know. Put the comments inside the comments section at Rumble. And, of course, the breakout segments over at YouTube, at the Liberty Conspiracy channel at YouTube. And I also want to mention to everybody that if you want to see that special report on Lebanon that I put together yesterday inside the news notes, that, of course, is for the genetically superior paid subscribers. But I did read pretty much most of it yesterday on yesterday's program. So you can check out yesterday's program. Just scroll through over at Rumble. That is not a breakout segment. However, if I do make it a breakout segment, I'll turn that into its own video for the paid subscribers over at Substack. But yeah, we've got great comments over about the flock cams and things like that. And we've got former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, BlackRock and Vanguard. Yes, Ehud Barak connected to the Axon Corporation and the replacement for the flock cameras. Good points, you guys. Very good points. And I also want to mention that the judge and Karen Kwiatkowski also observed something that I want to bring up as well. And that is this inside the Capitol building. Let's move over to a quick review of the Russia-Ukraine battle. And of course, Ukraine getting involved with, of course, attacking an Iranian ship.
Of Prime Minister Netanyahu and the former president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, talking to each other. It looks like there might be translators there. This is at Senator Graham's funeral at Washington National Cathedral. Washington National Cathedral. I'm scratching my head. What is the federal government doing owning a cathedral?
There you go.
Oh my God.
Well, anyway.
And I'll just mention, you know, some people might say, well, you know, the First Amendment as it shouldn't be interpreted as splitting the state from religion. Yeah, duh, right? We all get that, right? It says Congress shall make no law establishing a religion or abridging the freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of journalism, and freedom of association, and so on, in order to protest and address grievances against the government. But if you've got something called the National Cathedral, and I should have said the National Cathedral before, if you've got something called the National Cathedral, what does that connote? That is an establishment through the federal government of a particular cathedral that is the National Cathedral. Clearly contrary to the First Amendment. There's no arguing that. It's not that, well, they can't give money to it. I don't want the government to be taking my neighbor's money for anything. The output is oftentimes irrelevant. There are just different levels of how evil that is. Whether it's to kill people or it's to give people teddy bears, the source of it is still theft. So it starts from an immoral first step. But when it comes to establishing a religion, you can't argue that something called the National Cathedral, which is supported by federal tax money, is not an establishment of something by the federal government. A cathedral called the National Cathedral. It's not the National Synagogue. It's not the National, Cthulhu rest stop for fans of H.P. Lovecraft. They can't include everybody. Not everybody can go there. It's just so stupid. Why do people buy into the state? It just is unworkable.
Before Senator Graham's funeral, former President Zelensky and current Prime Minister Netanyahu met privately and then publicly with the president. I wonder what the president said to Netanyahu about the IDF in Gaza, Syria, and Lebanon, the removal of which is the linchpin of any peace agreement with the Iranians. And I wonder what tricks were up Netanyahu's sleeve to say to the president to get the war started again. What do you think, Karen?
I do think Trump understands that Netanyahu literally sank any chance for peace as equally as he literally started this war and got us into it. But Trump wanted peace. He likes war. He likes to be likes to be doing something all the time. But he wanted peace, and he didn't get it. He didn't get it because of Netanyahu. He also got humiliated in a sense because when Trump said to Netanyahu, why don't you move your troops back, this and that, Netanyahu doubled down and put more troops in, didn't respond, said, I don't listen to the United States. We have our own national interests, and they include taking over all our neighbors and bulldozing their property and genociding them. That's what we do. Don't tell us how to run our country. Well, they tell us how to run our country. So Trump is, I think, in many ways, he does share that with a lot of people in the sense that hypocrisy doesn't like it, even though he's the beacon of it. So I think he's going to I don't think he's going to be particularly kind to Netanyahu. But again, I've said it before too. Netanyahu, while his party looks to be pulling ahead slightly in this prime minister race in Israel, I do think Trump is looking and gaming the system. He never likes to be associated with a loser. So there's a couple things that might make the conversation not very positive. But Netanyahu is a beast. Okay, he is a manipulator, master manipulator. His extreme confidence. He knows how to manipulate Trump in particular. He knows how to push his buttons. And I haven't even begun to speculate yet on what they have on Trump. Okay.
Yeah. But don't forget, everybody, as Sean Hannity said, he's honored. He's very, very honored to be in the presence of Benjamin Netanyahu and to be fighting the number one, big foam finger out in the stadium, number one prime sponsor of terrorism, however the government wants to define it for you today. Just like public health. They'll define it any way they want, just like Humpty Dumpty will make words mean anything he wants them to mean. The politician in the Lewis Carroll story. To serve their ends. So Netanyahu's a hero. Iran, number one state sponsor of terrorism, even though Netanyahu made sure that Hamas, which they claim are terrorists, got millions of dollars for the leadership when they were in Qatar. And, of course, the fact that the United States is now together with al-Jawlani and his pals. Let's turn over to a little bit of information about this. You might find this quite interesting. Let's discuss this. Syria. You can't make this up, says Trita Parsi. Syria's top diplomat in the U.S. is a former al-Qaeda Nusra terrorist. Remember when I kept showing the pictures of John McCain with the al-Nusra front? That was al-Jawlani in the picture in Turkey from over a decade ago. Almost. Yeah, over that. 14 years ago. Yes, a former al-Nusra terrorist who kidnapped and imprisoned an American journalist after she had interviewed him. Here's her story, says Trita Parsi. Now, remember, Trita Parsi, clearly an evil person as well. I know he didn't get money from Netanyahu and didn't get to live in Qatar off the taxpayers of the United States, as the United States also insisted that millions of dollars went to the leadership of Hamas, which they describe as terrorists to us, even though they're not really terrorists. They just want a homeland for the Palestinians rather than getting mowed down all the time by the Israelis. Here it is. Lindsay Snell writes, my interview with the Syrian chargé d'affaires to the U.S. now, back when he was a member of Jabhat al-Nusra in the northeastern section of Syria.
This is Mohammed Kanatri, the recently appointed Syrian chargé d'affaires to the United States. It's not quite the same role as ambassador, but for all intents and purposes, he is serving as the Syrian ambassador to America.
And I'm here to play a role. As first Syrian resident diplomat at the United States in 2014, I think, I'm here to help build this new historic relationship.
I first met Mohammed Kanatri in July of 2016, when I was kidnapped by his group, Jabhat al-Nusra, in Syria. But before I get into him, some context. Russia and the Assad regime were bombing the Aleppo countryside relentlessly. And I went, as I'd gone many times before, to report on the situation. What I didn't know before I went was that Jabhat al-Nusra, the Syrian al-Qaeda affiliate, had taken control of more of the Aleppo countryside than ever before. Even areas technically under the control of the so-called Free Syrian Army were de facto Nusra territories.
Which was why the Russians and the Assad regime were trying to get rid of them, and the United States was supporting them. And we see what happened. So she got kidnapped after she interviewed that guy. He kidnapped her. Now he's the chargé d'affaires for Syria under al-Jawlani, both of whom have had photographs of them holding people's heads disconnected from their bodies. But remember, Sean Hannity is very proud to know Benjamin Netanyahu in that grand and noble white knight on the white steed fight against the world's number one sponsor of state terrorism. What a clown show. Can you imagine being like a neighbor of these people on the street, you just sit there, you'd probably walk in to talk to your spouse or, brother or sister, whatever, like, man, I can't believe we got to be close to these people. This is ridiculous. But they make themselves close to you because they are the invaders. The government is the invader. Incredible. Oh, and by the way, talking about paying money, we got a little something in the news notes for the genetically superior, of course. In addition to Hannity and Levin, many pop media talking heads, and yes, that's right, in addition to all of them, here we see this. Dropsite News has a new report. Israel is paying millions to train, as we probably suspected, train AI chatbots how to talk about Gaza. What are they doing? They're flooding blogs with Israeli interpretations of Gaza so that the AI will pick all that up. And many AI companies have been hiring people that the government of Israel has set out to try to get these jobs to train AI. Former Trump campaign manager Brad Parscale has overseen an operation posting hundreds of blog posts on behalf of Israel with the goal of infiltrating artificial intelligence, because Salem media is just not enough. You see? It's just not sufficient. Ben Shapiro, push him aside. As long as you can control the search results, everything's fine. It's fine. Totally cool. It's just like Google. Astounding. Oh, man. Amazing. Now, I'll give you a quick recap here, everybody, on this is the rest of what's going on the ground or in the sea in the Middle East, okay? So first off, we've got this. This is very interesting, actually, about the UAE, and Mario Naufel brings this up. The country Iran hit hardest, because the UAE was working with the United States very early on, is now one quietly reopening the door to it. The UAE took nearly 3,000 missiles and drones, more than any U.S. ally in the region. They answered with the most hawkish stance in the Gulf. And then it flipped. And now, all of a sudden, the past 36 hours, Iranian flights are heading back to Dubai. And we've spoken about how UAE might be one of the first to fall. They're starting to change because I think they see the writing on the wall. They see that Iran is going to control the Gulf in the long term. Meanwhile, Yemen's Ansar Allah takes credit for attacks on Saudi oil infrastructure, while Riyadh blames Iraqi militants. This is from Anti-War. So that's important, of course. And let me show you a little more of what's going on in the Red Sea. First, I'll talk about Saudi Aramco. They officially shut down their Jazan oil refinery. Folks, that is 400,000 barrels per day capacity. That's going to be off the market. I swear, Trump is he's a chaos agent. It's just crazy. And here is the latest. Now, they didn't hit this ship. The Yemenis pushed the ship back. They drove it back. Yemeni Armed Forces today announced a military operation targeting the Saudi oil tanker NCC, not 1701 like the Enterprise in Star Trek, the NCC Ghazal, accusing the vessel of violating the maritime blockade imposed on Saudi Arabia and ignoring repeated warnings. Now, they did launch airborne projectiles against it, but they didn't hit it. The ship turned back. And then finally, let me give you some Gaza and West Bank information. First, this is the level of depravity the IDF adores. While Netanyahu arrives to celebrate the life of a man who liked to deal in death, this girl's dying. Israel and the United States are blocking this girl from leaving Gaza. She can't even leave just for medical treatment. They have made clear that the deliberate denial of basic minimum humanitarian aid and medical evacuations will continue at least until Hamas disarms. Well, maybe if you hadn't given them so much friggin' money, those evil terrorists who aren't terrorists wouldn't be so well armed. Mr. Netanyahu, It's all a game, so that as he intentionally said they wanted to, they would have an oppositional force that would not negotiate and would insist on a Palestinian homeland, one state. Netanyahu knew it. Gaza, writes, this is Drop Site, I believe. Yeah, Drop Site, has 4,000 cancer patients, thousands of sick and wounded children, and 18,000 people approved for evacuation on World Health Organization coordinated medical lists. They remain trapped until the U.S. president and Israel's prime minister decide otherwise. Is that just, what the heck? What is going on? What in the world? What is, it's just friggin', I don't know, man. What? Okay, now here's the West Bank. At least 8 Palestinians, including a child, have been killed since Thursday as Israeli military raids and settler attacks intensify across the occupied West Bank. Just crazy. But as long as, again, please remember, as long as the algorithm can, keep this stuff out, we're fine. Everything's cool. Everything's totally cool. It's good. Everything's rocking.